Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. On this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games, which today, Dungeons and Dragons. Our guest today is Sue Weinlein. Sue has been, oh my God, I'm so excited she's here. First, she worked at TSR, she worked at Wizards of the Coast, she worked on games, she's worked on novels, she's worked on magazines and online social media. And today she's here with us. She also, by the way, is a 6th level elf cleric. So that's good. So Sue, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Hi, thank you, Peter. It's great to be here.
How are you?
Oh, hey, I'm great and always ready to talk about D&D. It seems like no matter how much time passes, that never gets any less interesting.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about your time at TSR and time at Wizards of the Coast and D&D. But before we get into that, I'd like to just a few minutes of getting to know Sue Weinlein. So, like, where were you raised? Give us the 10-minute version of your story from birth to working at D&D.
Whew. Well, so I'm a Wisconsin girl who grew up only less than an hour away from Lake Geneva, where D&D was born, and never knew D&D was even there. Had no idea. It wasn't until I was a young teenager that I even heard of D&D. Still had no idea. It was right in my own backyard, practically. But then I got the purple basic set for Christmas one year. And
did your parents just like randomly think, oh, this looks fun. This looks like
oh no, I did my research. In fact, here, wait. This is the one. You guys watching, how many of you also had this? Probably it was like 1984 when I got this, I think, something like that. Because I was 13 years old and I wouldn't have known about it at all, except for an article in Dynamite magazine. What's one of those scholastic magazines that you can order at school. And one year, the issue that I got had this article about this great new game, Dungeons and Dragons, like a story that you can tell cooperatively, you and all your friends. Oh my God, this sounded great, because I was a big reader, loved that idea, wanted to do it with my friends. And so I got the basic set. I was all excited. And then I conscribed my brother, who is 6 years younger than me, and my best friend to sit down around my dining room table and let's figure this game out.
Right.
I opened it up and found like the 64-page rule book. It blew my little mind, because I'd only ever just played board games up to then. And I apparently was not up to the task of learning D&D. Because when I brought this box out for this show, I opened it up to look through it, and I found this. I found a letter.
Dear, wait, hold it still. Dear D&D people.
Dear D&D people. So this is the 3-page letter with all of my questions that 13-year-old Sue could not figure out about this game. And see how I'm being vulnerable to all of you right now, revealing this secret? But no, and just check this letter out. It starts, upon buying your, dear D&D people, yes. Upon buying your D&D basic game set last year when I was 13, I have started to read the 64-page rule book several times, but given up in disgust by the time I reached part 5, the encounter. In disgust. You stated in an interview with Dynamite magazine, that the first version did not sell, quote, because no one could understand the rules. In my opinion, this hasn't changed one bit. Can you believe it? And I sent this letter, and 10 years later, the company hires me? What kind of fact checking did they do? Not too good. So it goes on to asking all of the questions that I had. And I will say my snotty Graham here probably ensured that I would not get an answer. And I don't remember ever getting an answer. Certainly it's not in the box. And so it was I had my questions. The last of the 13 questions in the letter is, why is the white crayon in this box? Here, I still have the white crayon.
Oh my
I
God.
don't have the dice anymore, but I do have this. And I know I didn't get an answer because I never knew what the white crayon was for until I came to work for frickin' company. And I asked the people who invited me to play in a game with them, what was this crayon for? And they explained about coloring in
The dice.
inscribed dice.
Right.
So I never did that, never used crayon for anything, and never played D&D until I got to college. Because my friends and my brother and I, we rolled up about 12 or 15 different characters and couldn't figure out how to make that mental leap from the board game mentality to the game of your imagination. And that's where I really fell down on the job. But luckily, I had a great group of friends in college, and we played D&D. They introduced me to the game and had just a ton of fun. In fact, my DM from those days is still my DM today, now that we're playing 5th edition. So that's a great, long-lasting relationship.
Well, I just want to say thank you to your DM for training you, getting your D&D chops, because that paid big dividends for my companies. Yes,
I'm glad I finally figured the game out.
Yeah. You know, hey, Sue, I had a similar thing. You know, I bought the Blue Box set in 1978. I didn't know anybody that played. I sat down with friends and tried to teach them to play. Us try to figure it out together. And I DM'd them up to 5th level, and then I accidentally killed off the whole party with a red dragon. and then they wouldn't play anymore. and then it was the following summer in Walla Walla, where I was staying the summer my mother lived. I went to a store and hooked up with a local gaming group, and there was a DM experience who was experienced DM. And the first time I sat down and played with him, all of a sudden the light came on. Like before, I was playing it like a board game, and I was always worried about what turn it was and all this stuff like that. And the first scene of that game, I'll never so vivid. He says, well, you're sitting in a bar and this old man comes down from the mountain, climbs up on the table and starts ranting about the orcs are going crazy in the mountains. And I'm like, what page is that on? Like, I didn't you're just making shit up, you know?
I know. I know. That light bulb moment was so great. What a gift.
I know. That is well, that's great. Okay, so where were you at this time? Where were you going to college? What were you taking in college?
So I went to college at Marquette University in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee. Okay.
And my game group at the time played in the chapel at the McCormick Hall dormitories. So just tempting a little bit of fate there.
And were you studying English literature or something?
Studying journalism. I was intending to be Lois Lane, you know, wanted to travel the world as a reporter. But then I had a few internships as a reporter, and that didn't work too well. I didn't really love it. I didn't love being a writer, you know. I thought I would. So, maybe I should be a copy editor. So I then had a couple of copy desk jobs at major metropolitan daily newspapers. Great opportunities for me while still in college. And I didn't love it. I didn't love that either. You know, I loved the work. I loved the editing, the helping the writer connect with the reader. You know, always having the reader in mind. I feel like, you know, this letter kind of shows me that was all. I think I'm channeling this inner 13-year-old all the time, channeling the reader who's confused about something. And I wanted to be the one to answer their questions, right? I wanted to be the one to help them have a great experience and really hear that, you know, get that vision from the writer. But being on the copy desk of a daily newspaper wasn't that great either. You're either staying up till 1 a.m. working to get the morning edition out, or you're getting up at 3:30 in the morning to get to work by 4:30 for the afternoon paper, which they still had then.
Right.
So that wasn't for me. And here I am, a senior, getting ready to graduate, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Maybe some of the people listening know what that feels like. But luckily, on a vacation back to visit my parents who had moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee by then, I went to a science fiction convention. And I attended a panel discussion called Editing Trilogies. And on that panel discussion was Jim Lauder.
Oh,
an editor in the book department at TSR.
And he's going to be my guest in 2 weeks.
Ah, see, it's perfect. So this is like a love letter out there to you, Jim, because eager young college students stayed after the panel, which I was rapt. I thought it was the most fascinating thing. And I think that was the moment I realized that that's a job. I love reading science fiction and fantasy, and apparently you can do that for a living. So talked to him about it, was shocked to find out that TSR, where he worked, was an hour away from where I went to school.
Right.
And he arranged for me to visit, where I met his boss, the managing editor of the book department, Mary Kirchhoff, who became a real influence.
Who is also our guest in 2 weeks. I'm having them on at the same time.
Those two are a dynamic duo. This is everyone. You got to tune in for this.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, before I forget, your former and current DM is online and says Sue is always great to have at a game.
Ah, that's awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Not to make you nervous.
Maybe I get extra experience points for the shout out I gave him.
There you go.
Maybe an inspiration die or so.
There you go.
Anyway.
Lobby for that. Okay. Okay.
No, so I did get the tour, and I was so excited that when I was getting ready to graduate, there was a job opening, and I applied for it and didn't get it. And a few months later, I applied again. So that first time, I think it was for Amazing Stories magazine. Didn't get it. Second time was for a game editor job.
And
didn't get it.
Is this still 1984 or a little later?
Oh, no, this has got to be like 1990, 1991 by now.
Okay.
The third time I applied was actually for a job that Mary had opened, and she remembered me. And I was so thrilled. I remember, doing research for the job interview by going to my local game store. And I walked into my local game store. And I was actually interviewing also at FASA, believe it or not. One of our competitors had an opening for a BattleTech editor.
Right.
So I walk into the game store and I ask for, to see some new D&D products and to see some BattleTech. And I remember the owner of the store looked at me and he's like, you don't want to see BattleTech. You don't want to see D&D. You want Vampire the Masquerade. Because that's what all the girls wanted to play. Vampire, not BattleTech. And I had to be really, imperious and say, no, I want BattleTech. Give me BattleTech. Give me D&D. So didn't get me to go over to the goth side.
You could say, look at me and no. Do I look like a goth chick? No. I want a mech. I want a BattleTech mech.
Well, and then the interview went much, much better with Mary and Jim than it did with FASA, apparently, because I was thrilled to be offered the job and moved to Lake Geneva only 3 months later to learn that the FASA applicant who they had offered the job to flaked on them.
Oh,
then they came back to me then. Too late.
By the way, Derek, our producer, is saying there's still some time to come enjoy Vampire. Your DM has promised to work something out. And let's see, Wizards Star Trek Steve is asked, who ended up getting you into the sci-fi genre?
Who got me into the sci-fi genre? That would be my brother. My younger brother, who I tried to forcibly turn into a D&D fan, and that never worked. He was great with rolling up the characters, but I never did get him into a game later. No, but my brother got me one day when there was nothing else going on. He's like, oh, Sue, you've got to come and watch this movie. It is so good. And I'm like, what movie are you watching? He said, Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan. I'm like, I don't want that Star Trek stuff, man. I said, I'm not interested in Dr. Spock or whatever. He's like, no, you have to watch it. It's so good. I'm like, okay. And then, fast forward 2 hours later, I'm crying like a baby, right? I am just a lifelong Trekkie from that moment on. And I started reading science fiction and reading fantasy, and Star Trek was a gateway for me. And that's why the matchup with TSR and our book department was so perfect for me, because I saw how impressionable kids would, maybe they weren't interested in other books or other, opportunities to read, something this big, but they loved gaming. And so they'd read a Dragonlands book, they read a Forgotten Realms book, and it opened up their eyes to so much more. It was the gateway to, a lifetime hobby and so much great reading. I had such a good time answering those letters. And like later, anyone at science fiction conventions where I was on panels, they'd say, oh, you write shared world novels over there at TSR. You publish shared world fiction. I'm like, yeah, it's great. New York Times bestseller list.
So let you're getting into the job, but I want to find out. Okay, so you show up. So did you move to Lake Geneva then? And you offered a job. What was that first job? You said it was working for Mary. What did she hire you to do? What day one at TSR?
I was editorial assistant in the books division. So this was a group of half a dozen people that produced, 30 novels a year in different fantasy lines: Dragonlands, Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, Ravenloft, you name it. And my job was to open the mail. My job was to make a lot of copies, bound galleys that got sent off to reviewers.
Okay.
I arranged publicity tours for our authors, and that sounds a lot more exciting than it probably was, because they pretty much just visited the local Walden books at their hometowns. I got to proofread all the manuscripts, and I got to review unsolicited submissions, aka the slush that came in from earnest writers who thought they had a place in our lineup. So it was a great job. We were like a little family in the book department, and it was just exciting to be there. But I realized that there wasn't a lot of room for me to move up in there. So I started eyeing the game department.
Ooh, by the way, on chat, they're still talking about Max. So there was they want giant vampire robots. I'm going to add goth. I think giant goth vampire robots. I guess goth that's yeah. Goth and vampire, you don't have to say that twice.
There's room for it all.
Yeah. Okay, so you started eyeing the now it's giant goth vampire mechs in D&D. Okay.
Riding dragons.
Yeah,
and dragons. You gotta get some dragons in there.
There you go. Okay, so you started. There working for Mary and with James and others, I assume, or just is anybody else? Who else was in that department?
Oh, that also included Eric Severson, who was our number 2 under Mary. Jim and Pat McGilligan were both off-site freelance editors at that time. Okay. Bill Larson, an industry veteran editor of children's books, used to work for Golden Books in Kenosha. He was a real pro, taught us so much. And Marlis Hiesel was the copy editor, I believe. And they all taught me so much. I think Rob King, who later became a novelist himself, was still an editor when I joined the book department.
I think somebody you edited is on here, Christopher. I can vouch for Sue's excellent feedback on sci-fi and fantasy work. She discussed my novels with me a couple of occasions over the last years.
Wow. Hey, that's very nice of you.
All right, so eyeing the gaming department. Right.
Yes.
Oh no, before we leave the fiction plot. So any authors that you didn't get a chance to mention, did you but if you were proofing, did you ever proof like an Ed Greenland novel or
Oh yeah. Everything. I was the proofreader. In fact, did we do 2? I can't remember. We maybe had me and one of the other editors also proofread. But no, I got to proofread everything that came out. And it's funny because we had like 2 days in the schedule to proofread. And
a novel.
320 pages, right? 2 days. And I was friends with some of the game editors, and they'd be like, oh, I have to do 32 whole pages of editing this month. I'm like, this month? 32 pages? Come on. I'm like, what do you do all day? Must be the reason why I wanted to work in that department.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I see the wisdom of the 2 days to edit a novel because proofreaders, if they have too much time, they could start questioning bigger issues in the book. If you just got 2 days to proofread it, you don't have time to overthink it.
Right. Well, Peter, I had a lot to learn because when I got to the game department and started my first projects, I learned there was so much more to being a game editor than what I was used to as a proofreader.
But how did you make the jump? How did you get over into the game department? Who smiled upon you?
Who finally took pity on me? After being rejected for that position a year or two earlier, David Wise hired me to be a game editor, and I joined the D&D group.
Yeah, David, great guy.
Mm-hmm. I owe him.
Yeah. So what happened? Like, how did you was there a job posting, like an internal job posting when there was a new position that people could apply for?
I believe so. But, I would never have gotten that full-time position if I hadn't done freelance on the side editing games beforehand. They like to test people out and make sure that they were ready for the job before they would actually offer it to me. So luckily, I had the opportunity to edit this.
Space Lair, Spelljammer.
Yes, Space Lairs. This baby bought me my first console Sony stereo system with 5 CD changer. So it has many benefits. It helped me get the job that I really enjoyed, and I got a great rec system alongside it.
Yeah. Okay, so now as a game editor, what did you do as a game to help our audience understand? I think I have a pretty good idea, but help our audience understand what a game editor does.
Yeah, well, like I was saying before about, an editor, no matter what genre it is, newspapers, magazines, games, your job is to help make the clearest connection possible between the writer or game designer and the audience. You want that message and that vision to come through crystal clear. In some respects, you're not just the editor, you're the first reader of this manuscript. And if something doesn't make sense to you, or if something is a little fuzzy to you, it's going to be fuzzy to the hundreds and thousands of people who come after you as the reader. So you owe it to those readers as the reader's advocate to make this the very best that it can be and make sure that author's vision shines through. And that's the philosophy that I always brought to the job. There are a lot of stages, though, to being a game editor, and I learned very well why you need 32 pages of editing needs a month, because you do a number of different passes through the manuscript. It's not just one and done, right? You read to get a sense of the whole, and then and take notes about things that aren't making sense to you or that you have questions about, and then you go through it again much more carefully, identifying those exact questions and coming up with ideas for what might make things move smoother, maybe rearranging some things, maybe some information is missing that needs to be added. You make a list of all the terms that are used in the book to make sure that the arch wizard that you're fighting doesn't change the spelling of his name between the first encounter and the last encounter. All that little stuff. Right. You have regular meetings with the author so that you can ask your questions and really pull even more good ideas out of the author than they even knew they had to get into the final draft. You edit and turn over the order for illustrations and maps to enhance the book and usability. Right. You participate in play testing, so any mechanical issues with the game's play experience get ironed out before it goes to press. You also, recheck all the math, because no matter how good we think we are at math, not everybody is as good as they think they are. And that was always a real headache for me, because I'm I'm more of a words person, not a math person, but it was really important, to make sure the stats were correct.
Right. So,
and then you kind of guide it through the production process as well. When you are done editing and it's turned over to the design team, you're not done with it yet. It gets laid out with the art and comes back to you in galley form, where you review the galleys. You have to maybe make some cuts or tweaks to make it fit. And it'll come back to you 2 or 3 times over the course of production. Finally, after going to the press, it comes back one more time in final blue lines. And those last minute changes there are expensive. So hopefully you did your job well, so you don't have to change anything at that point.
Right. That's good. Yeah. Ooh, well articulated, Sue.
It's a fabulous job, man.
Okay, so let's go into this period of you being a game editor, and just for context, was that your position up until 1997 when TSR was bought? Then you were game editor that whole time?
Yeah, that's right. I moved along from, basic little projects like this one, which was not only the first and only product that I got to pose for the cover. Can you make out which one is me?
Oh,
wait, not the ones with the beard. This was Skip Williams' design, and I know he's been a guest on your show as well. So Skip was a joy to get to edit, and he was very understanding of me, despite the fact that I let this one go to blue lines with a map published upside down. So a little bit of a humbling experience there. I think we caught it before it actually got printed, but I was no longer, after that happened, I was no longer the arrogant kid who walked around saying 32 pages in a month, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I became the person who let a map get published upside down almost. Moved from that over the course of several years to much more complex projects like this one.
Oh, yes.
This was a campaign setting called Birthright that I absolutely loved. And I want to give a shout out to one of the great editors, Anne Brown, who kind of nurtured me on my own professional development journey by co-editing this box set with me. She had edited many complicated and popular Forgotten Realms box sets before, and she understood how to keep all the components together when you've got 20 different cardstock sheets and 3 booklets and 2 map sheets and all of these different other components. How to create a plan to keep all of that moving and make it consistent, and build a coalition really of all the contributors to the project so that vision shined through to all of us.
Right.
And taught me so much about how to do that. And I have used it in almost every job I have had since then, inside and outside of the game industry.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. But we moved from group to group quite often back then. So, while I started out on the core D&D group, moved ultimately to, the Birthright group. And the Birthright group, I think, inherited Dragonlands. And that
quick question for you before we get into Dragonlands from chat. Were decisions to cut material usually more of a designer decision or an editor decision?
Decisions to cut material, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it is a collaborative effort, ideally, I would say to that. Because I cut my teeth in the newsroom, at any moment, the writer might walk up to your desk and look over your shoulder and say, "What are you doing to my writing?" Right? And I had to be ready with an answer. And it couldn't just be because it sounds better this way, right? Or because I like this word better. I had to have a real legit reason so that I could voice to him. And so when I became an editor of games, I followed that same philosophy. And if the writer may not come and look over my shoulder, I was going to bring my changes to the author and kind of say, well, here, I've done a couple of passes through the book, and here's what I am seeing. These are the kinds of changes that I'm making. And if it was a significant section that I thought needed to be deleted for space or for other reasons, I would bring that kind of thing forward. And if that person didn't agree, then we talk about the, whys and wherefores of it. And I tell you, I had some pretty heated arguments about things that could be cut and or shouldn't be cut, or phrases that meant one thing to the writer, but were eclipsing me. So it was a game of pick the battles you really need to win, right? And let some of it go.
I want to ask you about the problems. I'll ask you a slightly different question. Who did you really like editing? Whose work?
I really like editing.
Yeah.
Oh, I had good relationships with almost all of the editors or all of the designers.
Right.
I had a great time working with Bill Connors.
Okay.
He was very creative. He was a real character, and he visited me a lot. So, I really liked that.
Right.
I had a very good editor writer relationship with Monty Cook, who I later married. So that was definitely an important writer editor relationship in my life. Yeah, they stick out a lot. I think that being part of the Birthright team was also very important to me because working with the two main designers, Colin McComb and Rich Baker, was a great experience at being kind of let into the team and let into the whole design philosophy and being able to see how that design philosophy was executed throughout every component of the book and every portion of the play experience.
Right. Wow,
so
that's great.
I don't want to make anyone feel bad who I may have forgotten, but those come to mind right now.
They will all understand, the pressure of being on camera. So take us into Dragonlance, because I got to say, when I think of Sue Weinlein, my impressions of you, of course, are deeply rooted in Dragonlance, because you were neck deep in it by the time we met.
Well, it's true. And, before I ever successfully played a full session of D&D, I read this puppy, Dragonlands Chronicles.
Yeah.
The first 3 books really, really sang to me. They really spoke to me as, a high school kid. And I could really identify with our readers of this series. Never really left my heart. And so to be in Harold Johnson's group when the company decided let's bring Dragonlance back for another go was just so exciting. I feel like it not only had a great story to tell, but it merged the world of the books and the world of the games in a unique way that really spoke to me as a fan of both. And I may have been an editor and later a creative director for the Dragonlance game line, but I've always been at the heart a fan of the Dragonlance game line. And so that's one of the reasons why it was just so exciting for me and a great time of my life.
So tell us a little bit more about what you did with and as part of that team. Did you do any writing? Did you work a lot with Harold, of course, and Margaret and Tracy? Take us through your experience working on Dragonlance up until when we met.
Yeah. The Dragonlance challenge was quite a different one from so many of the other game lines that the company had, because the games had been superseded in sales numbers by the books. I mean, a long time past. And in fact,
you say books, I think our audience, you mean novels, right?
I do. I mean the Dragonlance Saga novels, yeah. And in fact, for several years before this moment, there hadn't even been any new Dragonlance game modules or adventures or box sets of any kind. By the time I'm talking the mid 90s, I think we had probably gone about 3 or 4 years without a Dragonlance new game product. So this was a reboot. This was a reboot of Dragonlance, and we took our creative direction from where Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman had taken the series. There was a fabulous and highly dramatic book called Dragons of Summer Flame, which was a New York Times bestseller. It put Dragonlance, on the map in a way it had not been for some time. Great hardcover novel, everybody was reading it, and Harold never won to shy away from a challenge as the product group leader said, well, how can we make this into a game? Where would we take the game from here?
Right.
And it was in a very different direction from the rest of Dungeons and Dragons. For one thing, it wasn't Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
This is what it was.
The Saga System.
The Saga System. It was a card-based game instead of dice that purported to create more of an experience, a storytelling experience, to a little bit different way of using cards to see if you succeeded or failed in the various efforts you were making in the game. The play experience was led by the narrator, not by a DM or a GM, and you got to play as or play with the characters of the books. Another really exciting thing about this line of games was that it was being published alongside a new series of books, Dragons of a New Age, right? The Fifth Age series. And so you could experience the saga in so many different ways all at the same time, which I think a lot of our fans in the 80s were doing with the classics, right?
Right. By the way, you're getting some chat. You're getting some chat love about Saga and Dragons of Summer Flame. So.
The Saga System fans, there was nothing like them. We were small, but we were mighty, guys.
Yes, it's being Let's Go Scott describes it as ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, I do believe that's true. Yeah. I mean, even in the packaging, the company went out on a limb with some great new packaging that, the box itself looked like a book. It was designed like a book. We were trying to just embrace the nature of Dragonlance as this dual genre kind of story. And I will be forever grateful to Harold and the other executives who championed this unusual design approach.
Right. That's good. That's great. Okay, so take us into the Wizards years.
Yes, so that would have been 1997, right?
1997, yeah.
So a big transition to move from small Walworth County, Wisconsin to Seattle, Washington. I always have said that working at TSR was kind of like just graduating from college, but then just finding a whole other college-like experience where you worked with people who were also your friends, who you hung out with after work, and you played games after work, and to extend that metaphor, it was that experience of moving to Seattle was like everybody, all of your best friends from your high school, we all just up and went to the same college. And in some ways, it's an appropriate metaphor because of everything that we learned in the transition from moving from a small company to a much larger organization that you led, Peter, with a lot more considerations on the business side than we in the creative department had been been aware of, been part of at TSR. So one of the things I remember is that when it moved out there and soon after became creative director of the Dragonlands product line, I had an opportunity to go to school and earn a certificate in people management. I mean, that opportunity of doing that 9-month course with some of the other new leaders at Wizards of the Coast really opened my eyes and helped me graduate from, enthusiastic, game editor to more serious-minded people manager and product leader. It was exactly the thing I needed at that time. And wow. I was very grateful for the opportunity.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's great. I don't think I knew that. Or, it's, we were talking before the show, how memory gets a little fuzzy. It's been 23 years since we met. I mean, I assume we met for the first time was in 97. Maybe we met at a convention before then, but
I believe you're right. I believe it's true.
Yeah.
23 years.
And I just got to comment on what an immediately powerful and positive impression you made on me, Sue. Like when I first met you out at Lake Geneva, it's like, wow, I really want that person on my team.
No.
She's
Well, thanks.
really smart and articulate, and our ideas were always well thought out. And I'm glad you took that class. We're jumping ahead, but are you in management? Are you people managing these days?
Yeah, in fact, you know what? I just realized we're getting ready to hire a new person on my team, and I just realized that when I get that new person, I'll have 6 people on my team, which is exactly how many people were in the Dragonlands team back at Wizards of the Coast, and as many people as we had on the online media team when I moved over to manage your website.
Yes.
6 must be the magic number.
You can change the world with 6 people, Sue.
That's also the size of the adventuring party. So of course you can.
There
right?
you go. You could go fight a dragon.
Yeah, but that Dragonlands team was such a wonderful experience. And it was certainly for a long, long time the team to beat in my heart, you know, getting a chance to work not only with Harold, but with Stan Brown and
Yes.
Miranda Horner and Steve Miller. It was just a fantastic collaborative experience. And a new facet of the experience was being able to work alongside the book department. So now here I am on the other side, on the game side of that collaboration.
Right.
The Dragonlands team, once we were starting to chart out the next in our series of products, we sponsored a Dragonlands Summit. We brought together the game side of the house and the book side of the house, and Weiss and Hickman came out, and we had this intense, boot camp experience for 2 or 3 days, charting out the storylines and how they were going to come to life in novel form and in game form. And it was a experience I'll never forget.
Right. Any fun stories about working with Margaret or Tracy?
I will definitely tell you that to this day, I have Margaret to thank for really showing me being a role model for me. And she probably hears this all the time, and she probably doesn't even know how much this meant to me. But in every situation, and there were some highly dramatic moments in, any creative relationship, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Margaret was always the picture of grace. And I think about that very often in my life, even today. That is the kind of grace I want to be able to channel in my life. And I look to her for whatever little success I've had that way. I look to her for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's good. Yeah, Margaret has been a dear friend of Gen Con. She talks positively about us. She comes, every year, supports our show, spending money as an exhibitor on us. And and I've always had a great relationship with Margaret. I think she was a gal.
Yep.
So okay, so at Wizards, working on Dragonlance, the game side of things, you said, but then you moved into online. Did we call it social media in those days? I don't think we did.
It was social, but we didn't call it that yet. Yeah. But no, I had a small detour to the periodicals department where I had a memorable 18 months, 2 years working on Amazing Stories.
Oh,
but
yes.
After a time, the company no longer published Amazing Stories. It never really found its audience the way we all hoped it would, and moved into the online media department. And basically what that meant is I got to be the editor of the website, wizards.com. It was awesome, and my time in the periodicals department really showed me. I remember we had a meeting with the web developer for creating an Amazing Stories webpage. And, he showed me how we could take the major selling points of the magazine and turn them into web pages or sections of the website and, make it engaging and make it interactive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I had never translated the editorial work I loved so much to the online environment before that eye-opening time. And then, a year later, the magazine went under, and there I was working right on his team. But by that point, third edition D&D was in the design phase, and it was an exciting time to be on your web team, because we had, well, I think we had a year, right, of a countdown, a teaser year after announcing that a third edition was coming to when it finally was released. And so at this point, we've got a team of 6 or so producers and another 6 or so web designers and web developers who were producing a number of sites on wizards.com, from the Dungeons and Dragons site to the Magic the Gathering site, Pokemon site, Star Wars trading card game site, role-playing game site, Gen Con site, all of that.
Yeah, by the way, you always get extra points for mentioning Gen Con on this show.
But the one that I worked on the most, my team members got to work on the other ones. I got to work on Dungeons and Dragons. So that was great. And, but on the other hand, we're like, what the heck are we going to put on this website for the next year? There's hardly any new games coming out. We scaled production way back because we knew that people were, going to not buy stuff that was about ready to become a lame duck, right? So, what are we going to do? And this has led to this whole experience really showed me, the art of marketing, and combining your marketing team, online marketing or whatever you may have, with the creative team and what you can accomplish. We created such a robust schedule of content, helping to create and build the excitement, counting down every month by month to the release of the new game. We had interviews with the designers and interviews with the artists and previews, tantalizing teasers, right? We interviewed, for heaven's sakes, the play testers. We had playtest group of the month on the website. We shone the spotlight on the fans, right? Who were, producing their playtest comments on the game to make the game better. We had, a map of the week, and what else can we put up? Cliffhanger adventures, where we gave you a portion of an adventure every week that ended on a cliffhanger, and then gave you another one the next week. So once you played them all the way through, you had a full adventure. We were, anything we could think of to keep the excitement building. And what a thrill it was when the game was finally unveiled, and all of those fans who had been hanging out on the website and attending our chat events. That was really the social part, right? Your very active message boards and very active chat rooms. For that time, that's another way that D&D was really ahead of its time. Being able to engender that kind of community online for a game that was months away from coming out.
Yeah, I had no idea that we featured playtest groups on that page. I mean, I remember us doing the countdown, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, fans have made us what we are. The fans, without them, we wouldn't have this long, robust history that you're talking about on this show. And it's always great to, I think, turn the camera on them. Right.
Oh, that's fantastic. Did so who'd you work with on that team? Was Sean Reynolds on that team with you?
Sean Reynolds was the webmaster for TSR, but when we moved to Seattle, he became a game designer. And I worked with web developers, Mark Jindra and Tim Thomas, Kevin Endo, Dan Man, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but he guided the Magic the Gathering site. He didn't need any, no wonder I don't remember his last name. He never needed any help.
Tim was a lot of fun.
Some of my co-editors from TSR came over to join the web team and help as web producers. So that included Miranda Horner and Julia Martin. They did an awesome job converting their high level of skill into a digital format. Yeah. So we had a great team under Wanda Gregory.
Oh yes, Wanda Gregory. That's a name. I hadn't thought about her in years. She was a sharp gal. That's for sure. So how long did you stay at Wizards?
I stayed until 2001.
Oh, you left the same year I did.
How about that? Coincidence?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was feeling like trying my hand at something else, and thought about doing some freelance work. I wondered if I could get back into the fiction realm again. I never really lost my love of editing fiction, and did a little bit of work in the fiction arena, but in the end wound up spending the next 7 or 8 years of my life as co-owner and co-publisher of Malhavoc Press, which was a small press D20 company, where we released great stuff under the D20 license, so compatible with 3rd edition D&D.
Right. So you did that for 7 years, so that takes you pretty much up to. So when did you move? Well, before we leave Wizards TSR completely, is there anything? Is there anything I rushed you past that you wanted to talk about anywhere in that time period? Any stories that you were hoping to tell that I didn't get a chance to? Just didn't line up with our how we trudged through.
Well, I guess I kind of wanted to give a shout out to some of the great women editors that I've had a chance to work with at TSR and at Wizards. And I'm thinking mainly of my more formative years at TSR. The women like Dory Hine and Andrea Hayday were never too busy to take a young, inexperienced person like me under their wing and help me understand why they marked up my galleys so bad, right? Help me understand some of the nuances that they had gained through their additional years of experience. I'd say that was a big, important part of my time and my development as an editor. I wanted to mention that. I also, we talked about Mary Kirchhoff before in the context of the book department, and I owe her a lot too for giving me a great role model to follow. Her professional demeanor among a bunch of goofy game designers never ceased to be the strongest argument that she could make, and I owe a lot of my own success, I think, to the kind of demeanor that she modeled for me.
Mary is she's tough. She and yet pleasant. I mean, she was great to. I'm looking forward to seeing her in a couple of weeks. I always had a real admiration for Mary, and I'm glad you did too, because it confirms my suspicions that that's fantastic. So. Okay, so when as we're kind of getting towards the end of our time, catch us up on what's happened since then. What are you doing these days? How'd you get up? You're back in the Midwest now?
Yeah, I'm back in the Midwest now. I realized that again. It felt like I needed a change, and in particular, kind of was a little drained from working for myself, working at home, just, me and my husband at the time. That it was a great experience, but I didn't think in the end it was for me long term. So came back to Wisconsin, where I got a job at Northwestern Mutual, which is a great financial services company in Milwaukee. And it's funny. I can't believe they ever hired me, really, because look at my resume. Does it scream financial services at you? I had never even worked in corporate communications before, but so much of what I learned earlier in my career, so much of what Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlands taught me was exactly applicable to the work I was doing in corporate communications. I didn't know anything about financial products, but I understood how to edit difficult technical game material, and the discipline that you need to understand both is pretty much the same. I know that some of the folks at Northwestern Mutual were surprised when I came on board after hearing that, Dungeons and Dragons woman was going to come and work in the communications department. Thought I'd be like all covered over with tattoos and nose piercings and whatnot. That you said she was from Seattle. Right?
Not that there's anything wrong with all.
No, but they were kind of surprised that I didn't look, more outrageous. But see, there are gamers everywhere, and it didn't take long before the gamers at Northwestern Mutual came and found me. And I've had so many great lunches, being regaled with stories. Ironically, we have a big annual meeting every summer that's held at the same convention center where Gen Con was held in Milwaukee for so many years.
The Mecca Center.
Yeah, it's a big convention where all of our financial representatives come. And
but they don't call it the Mecca Center anymore, do they? They renamed it.
Although now there's a bar called Mecca that they put up near the brand new arena. But no, it was the Wisconsin Center most recently.
Yeah.
And I know that there was, at this big annual meeting, we had a big exhibit hall just where the Gen Con exhibit hall always was, except the booths now were not hawking, the greatest new zines or independent games. They were hawking
giant goth vampire mechs. Yeah.
No, I know. Now the booths were all about like annuities and like long-term care insurance. I'm like, wow, things really changed. But on the other hand, they didn't change all that much. It was still, this huge crowd of men with a scattering of women, migrating to Milwaukee for, a fabulous 4 days of learning and re-engaging and excitement. And there was more than one time during planning meetings for this annual meeting where I referred to it as Gen Con.
Yeah. Nice.
and just like stopped everybody in the meeting cold, and they stared at me. I'm like, what did I say? Oh, the annual meeting, right? So yeah, Gen Con and D&D is still in my thoughts, even as I have moved on to the corporate world. And in fact, it has been even more relevant since I left corporate communications after about 10 years and moved into the digital workplace team. So I'm now working in technology, which is a really scary thing for someone who at one point didn't know what the white crayon was for in her Dungeons and Dragons box. Now I have to answer questions and understand audience concerns about, Zoom meetings and, Slack channels in our corporate environment. And, why doesn't the internet work for me?
Right.
So yeah,
right.
I was privileged enough to get to go and deliver a talk at a gamification conference a couple of years ago. And the title of the talk was "Everything I Ever Needed to Know About Gamification I Learned from Playing D&D."
Nice.
Walked them through all of the parallels between successful gamified systems in the technology world to those principles of fun, entertaining gameplay that we learned by doing in the 90s.
All right, so it's time for my closing question for you, Sue. Because I don't know, we as gamers, I look back on the time that we worked together as magical. I mean, just working on Dungeons and Dragons. For me, also working on Magic the Gathering, of course, and Pokemon, the 90s. When you and I know it feels that way for you too. When you reflect, when you reflect back on the 90s, and what did you take away from that?
I feel like those years, from the start at TSR through my last days at Wizards of the Coast, really gave me this whole roster of experiences that have made me the person I am today and have taken me to where I am in my career. No one would look at this as a normal career path of someone going from, book and game editing to the corporate world in technology. But every single step I have taken in my more recent career, it all ties back to my time with Dungeons and Dragons. The power of building relationships and what you can accomplish both creatively and technologically through having a solid relationship foundation to fall back on. The idea of being clear and listening to your audience. Nowhere is that more important than it is in the technology world, where you need to create a great experience for them. And my job today hinges on that. But it all started from reading those Dear Dragonlance letters in the book department and talking to fans at Gen Con about their character,
And I love that James Lauder and Mary Kirchhoff were played prominently in you coming in, because those are going to be our guests in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for being with us today. It's great. I know you were hesitant to jump into this. We're always worried about our memories of that time. But and what am I going to say? But you did great. Fantastic guest.
Oh, thank you. What a pleasure it was.
It's so good to see you again. Okay, well, that wraps up another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison. I will not be coming back to you live next week. I'm going to take a week off from the show. In fact, I'm going to take a week off from the whole pandemic. I'm just going to I'm getting tired of that too. I'm just going to stay home and social distance as a choice just for my own self. I'm just going to be a couch potato for a week. I probably won't, but that's okay. We will be back in 2 weeks. Our guests will be, as I mentioned already, Mary Kirchhoff and James Louder. I'm really looking forward to seeing them. They're both coming on. They worked closely together. When I suggested to Mary that she come on the show, she's like, let's bring James in. Let's do it all together. It'll be fun. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds good to me. All right. In the meantime, don't forget, we have Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific time. We have table takes. We have at 3:30. We have roundtable discussions here on Gen Con TV. Also Mondays at 6 p.m. we have board games with the Brothers Murphs. And Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. we have board games with This Game Gets Dicey. Oh, that's a tongue twister for me. I got to work on the wording of that one. But we will be back again with James and Mary in 2 weeks. Also, keep in mind that most of our episodes from Magic the Gathering are available now in pods as podcasts on podcast sites. So go check those out. Please remember to follow us, subscribe to us, tell people about us, help us spread the word. And if you miss any of our shows on Twitch, they're all uploaded to YouTube the next day. So come to YouTube and catch them there. So thank you once again to our guest, Sue Weinlein, and also our studio manager, Marcus Mays, our streaming manager, Lauren Bond, our producer, Derek Guter, and Gen Con TV for hosting us. And most of all, thank you for watching.